Great experiences don't build themselves.
Behind every personalized journey is complexity, tools, teams, and tech.
AI moves fast. Expectations move faster.
Adobe Experience Cloud offers the power, but strategy turns potential into performance.
This is the AEM Analytics Consulting's Adobe at Scale podcast.
Subscribe, align your stack, accelerate your enterprise. You're listening to our Adobe at Scale podcast, where we demystify the Adobe Experience Cloud and turn enterprise complexity into clarity. Hosted by experts from AEM Analytics Consulting. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, presented as part of the AEM Adobe Cloud series. It's great to have you with us. Today, we're tackling something really crucial for, well, any business leader focused on efficiency and ROI. We're talking optimizing your Adobe real-time CDP configurations specifically to fight wasted ad spend.
Yeah, definitely a hot topic. We see ad budgets going up. But for a lot of companies, that return on investment just isn't keeping pace. It feels flat, So there's this real need to understand, okay, where's money actually going? Is it really working for us?
Absolutely. And it does connect back to things we've discussed before. I think we had a previous deep dive touching on misconfigured CDPs more broadly. It's a surprisingly common issue, often just quietly draining marketing budgets in the background.
Exactly. Look, a platform like Adobe Real-Time CDP, it's incredibly powerful. It's meant to be that central hub for all your customer data. But, and this is the key thing, if it's not set up just right, if those configurations aren't optimal, those gaps, even small ones, can silently stop it from delivering the lift you expect. And instead of boosting performance, it can actually, burn cash.
Burn cash? How exactly does that show up?
Well, you see it in a few ways. Maybe your targeted campaigns just have persistently low conversion rates, or you're hitting the same person with duplicate ads across different channels, and ultimately, your customer acquisition cost, your CAC, just keeps creeping up.
So the tech has huge potential, but a bad setup turns it from an asset into potentially a liability.
Precisely. It is absolutely not plug and play. That's a key takeaway. Without regular checks, sort of a structured process to look at these configurations, organizations often bump into problems, like failing to properly unify customer identities, or feeding segments data that's just too old to be useful, stale data, or even losing track of data compliance when activating campaigns, which can actually block things.
And every one of those friction points means wasted money and missed chances to connect, right?
Absolutely. Direct hit to the budget and growth potential. But here's the important part. Finding these hidden problems doesn't necessarily mean some huge, complex technical project.
Which brings us right to the core of this deep dive. We want to walk through a practical, structured process, something designed for marketing and CRM leaders. Basically, a 30-minute audit framework you can use to spot these common configuration issues. Spot them before they snowball into major budget waste and kill your CDP's ROI potential.
Exactly. The idea is to give you a clear checklist, empower you to peek under the hood of your own CDP instance, understand where the leaks might be, what levers you or your teams might need to pull to fix things fairly quickly. And like you said, this isn't about you needing to become a platform developer overnight. It's about knowing what business and strategic things to look for, using the tools you already have access to in the platform interface.
Okay, great. Let's really unpack this. The framework outlines, 6 key areas for this audit? And it's self-contained, right? No developer needed, just access to the CDP workspace, campaign dashboards, activation logs.
Yep. Think of it like a focused health check, hitting the most common spots that directly impact how efficiently you can actually activate your audiences.
So where do we begin? First up is identity graph accuracy. Why start there?
Well, it's fascinating just how foundational this is. A correct, solid identity graph underpins, everything else you do downstream, especially activation. See, if the CDP isn't accurately stitching together all those different touch points for one customer, maybe their web visits, app usage, email clicks, CRM purchase history, then that single person looks like multiple separate profiles inside the CDP.
And the symptom you'd likely spot in your data then is
just that. The same user counted again and again across different channels, different reports. It makes your audience look bigger than it is. The ad spend impact, it's direct and significant. Audience overlap. You end up targeting the same individual multiple times, display ads, social, maybe even email. So this inflates your impression count, which directly hikes up your costs. You're essentially paying repeatedly to reach that one person.
Wow, yeah. That's a huge potential budget leak right there.
Yeah.
So the audit step involves looking at the identity service, specifically merge policies. What are we checking?
Okay, so you need to examine those merge policies. Understand how identities are being linked, and look for flags like high numbers of orphan profiles, those IDs that haven't linked up to a master profile, or just high duplication rates the system itself might report. But even more crucial, confirm your key identifiers, things like email addresses, EIDs, those Adobe IDs, and your internal CRM IDs. Confirm they aren't just being ingested, but are actively used in your merge rules. And critically, across all the relevant data sets you're feeding into the CDP. If those core IDs aren't flowing in consistently or aren't configured right in the rules, your graph will be inaccurate, lead straight to that costly duplication.
Got it. Identity is clearly step one. What's the next critical area people often overlook that costs money?
Okay, moving on from identity, the next big one is segment freshness. It's called real-time CDP, so you'd think segments update instantly. But that's not always the default, depending on how it's set up. Real-time targeting, especially for those quick time-sensitive actions, it only works if the data is truly fresh when that segment gets evaluated. If there's a big delay between a user doing something important, viewing a key product, adding to cart, whatever, and that info actually making them eligible for a segment, you've missed the boat. That window of intent is gone.
And the common symptom you'd probably notice is just lag, right? Significant delays in your segment data.
Precisely. Seeing lags of 30 minutes, 60 minutes, sometimes even more, it's not unusual if things aren't optimized. And the ad spend impact is huge. Missed behavioral intent. You might trigger an ad or an email based on something they did an hour ago. By then, maybe they bought elsewhere, maybe they just lost interest. Your message is poorly timed, irrelevant, wasted spend.
So how do you audit for that timeliness?
You need to check the recency of your segment updates. You can usually find this in areas like segment insights in the platform. Now, standard real-time CDP profile updates for segments happen maybe every 15 to 60 minutes. That's fine for many use cases. However, if you're running campaigns that need like sub-minute reactions, think instant cart abandonment emails or offers right after someone views a high-value page, you absolutely must confirm you're using Adobe Edge segmentation capabilities. Otherwise, you're just not reacting fast enough for those moments. And that's money left on the table, or worse, spent on old intent.
Okay, so we've covered who someone is and when they did something. Now, you mentioned computed attributes. Audit Area 3. What are these exactly, and why are they better than just basic demographics for targeting?
Right, Area 3. Look, static data age, gender, location. It gives you a basic sketch, but it tells you very little about their current engagement, or their history with your brand. Computed attributes, these are dynamic metrics. They're calculated directly from customer profile data and their interaction history over time. Things like last purchase date, total lifetime value, visit frequency in the last month. Even things like a calculated propensity score.
So the symptom, if you're not using these effectively, is that your segments feel kind of flat. They don't really capture actual engagement.
Exactly. Your segments might be built on broad strokes, but miss the nuance of actual behavior and value. The ad spend impact. It links directly to poor personalization. Your targeting stays generic because you lack that rich, dynamic data needed for truly high-performing segments that reflect their current relationship and potential value. You're targeting based on static facts, not active behavior.
How do you check if you're using these well? What's the audit step?
So in the audit, you'd look at areas related to attribute composition in the CDP. You need to check that your key performance indicators, the metrics really driving your business like purchase count, recency, LTV quantity, are actually available and correctly set up as computed attributes. But just as importantly, you need to confirm you're actively using them to build your behavior-driven audiences, your high-value segments, not just relying on those less insightful static fields. If they exist but aren't in your segment definitions, that's a huge missed opportunity for better targeting.
Okay, that makes sense. So you define the right audience accurately, freshly, with dynamic data. But then you actually have to get that audience to activation platforms, right? Which leads to Audit Area 4, destination delivery. Seems obvious if the segment doesn't get there, the campaign bombs. But how does this actually waste spend?
Yeah, it should be straightforward, but technical glitches or setup issues can stop the full segment or even delay it significantly from reaching your downstream activation platforms, your DSPs for ad buying, social platforms, email systems, all that.
Leading to that symptom of partial activation you mentioned.
Which directly hits your reach and waste potential, yeah. Your campaign tools might say you should be targeting 1 million people. But if, because of delivery errors or hitting platform limits, only half that segment actually syncs to the destination, well, your campaign just isn't reaching its full potential audience. The effort building the segment was partly wasted, and your cost per acquisition for the folks you do reach might be higher because you're activating just a fraction of the intended group.
Makes sense. So the audit here focuses on monitoring those connections out.
Correct. You'll want to go into the destinations area in the CDP. Look specifically at monitoring or delivery logs. Actively hunt for error logs, any delivery failures reported, or significant latency. Ideally, syncs to key destinations should be happening well under an hour, though it varies by destination. And also, you need to check that the audience sizes you're trying to push actually fit within the sync caps or technical limits of the specific Adobe connector or even the downstream platform itself. Sometimes the pipes just aren't big enough for massive audiences, and you might need to tweak your strategy.
Okay, area 5. This touches on something crucial and often complex: governance and policy labels. How does compliance labeling connect to ad spend?
Oh, this is incredibly critical, especially now. And it has a direct, sometimes hidden impact on activation and spend. See, Adobe RT-CDP has strong data governance tools. They enforce data usage rules based on labels you apply to your data when it comes in. Now, if your data isn't labeled correctly according to your own privacy policies, regulations like GDPR, user consent choices, the platform is actually designed to block that data, or segments using it, from being used in certain ways.
And the symptom would be?
Would be just that. Incomplete labels leading to data or entire segments being blocked from activation. And often, you might not see a big flashing error message right away in your campaign tool. The ad spend impact isn't just the legal risk from misusing data, which is huge, obviously, but it's also constrained marketing access. You might spend ages building the perfect segment based on really valuable data. But if that data isn't correctly labeled for marketing use or consent isn't properly tracked through the labels, that segment just won't activate. That's wasted effort, lost opportunity to reach valuable people.
So the audit means diving into the data governance section of the CDP.
Exactly. Under data governance, you need to validate that all your data sets have the right marketing and compliance labels. Check against your internal policies, GDPR, CCPA, whatever applies. Make sure data collected with consent for marketing is explicitly mapped and labeled for outbound activation. And crucially, check the enforcement logs or policy violation reports regularly. These logs tell you exactly where compliance rules are stopping segments or data fields, giving you clear pointers on what needs fixing.
Right, that's vital. Okay, last one. Audit area 6. ROI visibility per segment.
Right, that feels like the ultimate point of using a CDP, right? Connecting effort to business results. How does lacking this visibility burn cash?
It really is the end game, isn't it? And not having it creates this massive blind spot. If you can't effectively link campaign performance, the ad spend, the conversions, the value generated back to the specific audience segment you targeted, then, well, meaningful optimization is basically impossible. You just don't know which segments are driving efficient conversions cheaply and which are just eating budget without delivering value. So the symptom is simply no clear connection in reporting between a segment and its results.
Pretty much. No reliable link from segment X targeted to X dollars revenue generated. And the ad spend impact is clear. You can't optimize effectively. You're flying blind, essentially. Unable to confidently shift budget to the audiences that give you the best bang for your buck, lowest cost per conversion, highest LTV, and away from the ones that aren't working.
And the audit step involves tagging segments and syncing data back.
Precisely. The key is setting up the measurement discipline before you activate. You need to ensure you're tagging your important segments with clear, consistent IDs before pushing them out. Then, and this is critical, make sure you have the connections and processes to sync that downstream performance data. Impressions, clicks, spend, and crucially, conversions and revenue back into your main analytics platform, Adobe Analytics, CJA, whatever you use. That's where you connect performance back to those original segment tags. This closed-loop reporting lets you build dashboards showing spend versus conversion per segment. Finally, you can see which audiences are efficient and deserve more budget and which are just burning cash.
That framework lays out a really clear investigation path, and I think the source material had a great real-world example of just how big the impact can be.
Yeah, it really drives it home. The story about the global media buyer who did this kind of audit on their Adobe RT-CDP, pretty powerful. They discovered, and I think this genuinely surprised them, that a massive 38% of their entire digital ad budget was being wasted. Just spent over and over again targeting duplicate profiles across display, social, search.
38% on duplicates alone, that's huge.
Absolutely substantial waste. So after they implemented changes based on what they found in their audit, mainly fixing their identity stitching in the CDP, which cut their duplication rate by half, and shifting their targeting away from static demographics towards those behavior-driven segments using computed attributes. Well, the results came fast, and they were dramatic.
What kind of performance shift did they actually see?
Within just 6 weeks, they reported seeing a 19% improvement in their overall conversion rates for the targeted campaigns.
Wow, a 19% lift in conversions in only 6 weeks that's incredibly significant.
It really is. And the bottom line wasn't just better efficiency. It was over $1 million in annual ad spend freed up. Budget they could then take away from those wasteful duplicates and put towards the high-intent audiences they'd identified. Plus, their campaign reports suddenly became much more useful because they finally had that clear, data-driven link. This segment drove these results.
That example just perfectly illustrates why taking this time looking under the hood matters so much for the actual bottom line.
It absolutely does. And it really boils down to maybe 3 key takeaways from this. First, just having a powerful CDP, even Adobe's real-time CDP, doesn't automatically cut waste or boost ROI. You need active configuration discipline, ongoing attention.
Right. It's a powerful tool, but it needs tuning and the right fuel.
Exactly. Second, these issues we talked about, duplication, stale data, blocked segments, poor measurements, they're often silent killers. They quietly burn budget and hurt performance without setting off light alarms in the tools marketing teams use every day.
They're the hidden costs of getting the configuration wrong.
Precisely. And third, the really good news here, a structured audit like this 30-minute checklist idea, it's actually feasible for teams to do themselves. And as that example showed, it can deliver actionable insights very quickly, insights that lead to real, measurable ROI improvements pretty fast.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the strategic value of proactively auditing your CDP setup really can't be emphasized enough.
Yeah, investing just that half hour to systematically check these 6 areas, it can genuinely unlock significant ad budget savings and noticeably improve campaign effectiveness. It really helps make sure that powerful platform is truly driving performance, not accidentally draining resources.
It really highlights why leaders need to ensure their core customer data tech is optimized and working for the business goals, not against budget efficiency.
Indeed. And while a quick audit like this is great for spotting immediate problems and getting quick wins, sustained optimization, getting the absolute maximum ROI from your CDP, that needs ongoing discipline, a continuous focus on measurement.
Which brings us perfectly to our final thought for you, our listener, to consider. You can absolutely run this quick audit now, but thinking longer term, how can your organization embed this kind of configuration discipline into your regular operations? How do you make these vital checks just a routine part of how your team works? To guarantee that long-term ROI and efficiency from your big CDP investment, it's definitely a critical question for achieving sustained, data-driven growth.
A key challenge, definitely, for both marketing and tech leaders.
Well, that concludes this deep dive, part of our AEM Adobe Cloud series. We really hope this look into optimizing your Adobe real-time CDP configurations has given you some valuable insights and maybe a clear path forward.
Yes, thank you for taking the time to join us for this important discussion.
And if you found this deep dive useful, or if you have your own thoughts, questions, maybe challenges or successes with your CDP setup you'd like to share, please do. We always appreciate hearing from you.
Goodbye for now.